Should the new Destruction album be referred to as diabolical in a good way or a bad way? Should you buy it? I'm going to answer those questions and also tell you my 3 favourite tracks on the album, only one of which we've already heard prior to the album's release. So why should you care about my opinion? Well, maybe you shouldn't, but I am Jason Arnott, veteran metal journalist. I got into metal in 1986, the golden year of thrash, and then worked on Kerrang! Magazine between 1988 and 2002. And since then, I've written for pretty much every major metal magazine. So let's get into it and acknowledge a hard truth. And trust me, as a Destruction fan, this is a very hard truth to tell. The band's 1986 album, Eternal Devastation, their second album, is one of my favourite thrash albums of all time. It would definitely be in the top 10, probably the top 5. And so, you know, that's the root of my Destruction fandom. I also love Release from Agony, their third album, and ever since then, Destruction albums have been really welcome, obviously, as a Destruction fan. But the really hard truth is that their last truly great album, I believe, was The Antichrist in 2001. So yeah, that's 21 years ago. And since then, Destruction albums have been really welcome. I own the albums, I've got them, and I enjoy them, I play them. But generally speaking, they're good, not quite great. And in the 2010s in particular, Destruction have ended up kind of treading water. They've ended up in a bit of a creative rut. Now that situation changed when co-founding guitarist Mike Siffringer left the band. So yeah, that felt massive. And then Martin Furier joined the band as the second guitarist alongside Demir Eskic. So now Destruction have 2 guitarists and no Mike. Well, if you've been paying attention to the promo videos, you already have heard 3 tracks from the album, and you'll have heard that they're all pretty damn good. But what's the rest of the album like? Well, it's really good. Yes, hooray! And it's really good for a number of different reasons. The production is definitely better and clearer and stronger and more focused than Destruction albums have been for a while. And it really feels as though fresh blood has been pumped into Destruction in a number of different ways. The songs are more varied, for one thing. There's definitely more of a variety of songs, and that's really important. With the more recent Destruction albums, you kind of know what you're going to get, and it's not a massively varied selection of songs. Whereas there's definitely a greater range of songs on this album. And almost more importantly, these songs are more dynamic. They kind of race out of the gate a bit more, and there's more going on in terms of tempo and arrangements and just simple things like stopping the music for a riff to come in by itself and then slamming the music back in again. For some reason, Destruction kind of stopped doing that. I mean, obviously they did occasionally, but just not with such great effect. And there's a song in this album called The Last of a Dying Breed, which does that to great effect at the start of the song. You know, the riff comes in by itself and then the drums come in, the classic thrash beat. You really notice that, and there's a lot more stuff like that. But perhaps the biggest change with this record, and it really feels like a pretty big change to me, is that we actually have memorable refrains on this album. I mean, obviously, you know, we have some on the previous albums. Every Destruction album that's come out since the millennium has had, you know, refrains, the odd memorable song. But to be honest, not that many. Yeah, I mean, you'll have heard on the title track, Diabolical, that there's a really good melody on the bridge. The bridge of that song is great. There's lots of that stuff. Also, No Faith in Humanity kind of builds to a pretty strong melodic chorus as well, which is kind of unexpected. But importantly as well, these are melodic choruses, but they're not crazily melodic, you know, they're not pretty choruses. And there are catchy riffs too. There's a song called Repent My Sins, which has a really catchy mid-paced riff. So it's not all about the choruses, you know, it really feels like the band, perhaps because of the global situation, the band have also had more time to work on this stuff, and it shows. The closing track, well, at least the closing track before the GBH cover, Horrification, is also really good. That feels really creative with a kind of a mid-paced riff involving involving triplets. If you're enjoying this video, then please destroy the like button and also subscribe if you haven't already for more reviews like this, reaction videos, unboxings, and my interviews with metal people, old and new. So let me tell you what the 3 best tracks are. The first one is the title track, Diabolical. That is one of the best tracks on the album. You'll have heard that, and at the end of this video I'll put a link on screen to my reaction video to that song. It's a really good sign that it's actually hard to choose the other 2 songs. I think that's a really good sign for this album. Nevertheless, the second best song in my opinion is Tormented Soul. Now Tormented Soul pretty much starts out with the kind of riff that we haven't heard from Destruction in a long time. It's a kind of slower tempo, chuggy riff, just really heavy. And yeah, I can't remember the last time I heard that in a Destruction song, so that's amazing to hear. And it's a really good song, a really strong song. I kind of wish they'd used that slower chugging riff a little bit more in the song, maybe made it more of a centerpiece of the song, but it's still there. And the third best song also has one of the best titles on the album, Servant of the Beast. Yeah, we love it when Destruction talk about Satan, don't we? Let's be honest with ourselves. We love a bit of that. And it's a great song, but it's also really varied. And when I say that, I mean it's varied within itself. And this is an example of Destruction taking on board more influences, which I think is really good. So the song starts out like a riff that could have been early Helloween, kind of a melodic fast riff, speed metal type riff, and then it introduces later on, and I think pretty much ends with a Voivod riff. You know, I mean not literally a Voivod riff, but a Voivod style riff. Yes, definitely a tribute to Voivod, I would say. And it's so nice to hear Destruction branching out and trying new things. It's really shot new life into the band, which is so great to see. Now, if I was reviewing this for Kerrang back in the day and this popped up in a time machine, would I have given it 5Ks? Not quite, not quite. It's a really good album. It's a really strong 4K album. There's the odd song, The Lonely Wolf, starts off great and doesn't quite fulfill its promise. And actually, I think the first single from this album, State of Apathy, is a fairly kind of generic thrasher, you know, by the standards of the rest of the album. And the closing GBH cover I can take or leave, but I'm not, you know, generally into covers, so you know, maybe you should take that into account. But Diabolical is a really strong album, and I think it could pave the way. I think this lineup is capable of making a true classic of the stature of The Antichrist from 2001. But don't get me wrong, Diabolical is going to be more than enough to keep us Destruction fans happy until the next album. As always on Possessed by Metal, I want to hear your views on all of this. What do you think of the tracks you've heard, whether you've only heard a couple of tracks or you've now heard the full album? Am I right? Am I wrong? I want to hear about it. If you'd like to see my in-depth coverage of the title track, then check out this reaction video I made when I first heard it while watching the promo video for the song. Thanks for watching, and metal.